Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. West Marches are probably some of the hardest campaigns to run. In college, I actually ran one where a fellow Dungeon Master and I would host one in person for about a dozen people. We would present 2 tasks that need to be completed at the same time and let the party members choose which mission seemed like a better fit for their character. Lucky for us, all the players got along, but there was like this unspoken competition between players who always seemed to pick the opposite kind of mission. While it never turned into a true horror story, it did eventually lead to some players only wanting to play with their preferred Dungeon Master, which ultimately ruined the appeal of doing a West Marches campaign. I really did have fun running it, but it made me realize even the best ran West Marches over time will cause an imbalance that will likely never appear at your standard game table. Today's treasure was submitted at lootgoblinstories@gmail.com and goes by the name The Bloody Saga of Cherry the Drow Cleric. It actually comes in 3 parts, the first one being called The Rise of Cherry. I was part of a West Marches server that used DeviantArt and Discord. Members would post character sheets and art to the Deviant group while they socialized, roleplayed, and ran sessions on the Discord. We played 5th edition D&D, where we all had player characters, and the moderators, sometimes players approved by the mods, would run games for the interchanging parties that went between 4 to 5 players out of a total of at least 30 in the whole server. I was there for several years, until I was kicked out with 3 strikes to my name. To put it out on the table early, my strikes included making not safe for work comments towards someone's female original character in a drawing that the artist didn't want to be sexualized, and another in a voice chat. I offhandedly mentioned a hentai in conversation with a few people, with the third party in the chat finding the topic uncomfortable. I do appreciate the transparency that you're being a bit of a gooner here. I'm sure we'll read shortly what the third strike is. For the record, I don't blame some of the mods for kicking me out, nor am I resentful towards any of the players. I'll reveal why I said some later. My time after getting kicked from the group gave me a chance to grow and reflect as a person. I bring this up because the stuff that I did, which I don't believe I'm innocent of, pales in comparison to the problem players of this story. I'm going to change the names of the characters involved to protect the innocent. Let's start with my character, Harry, an anxious, compassionate, and idealistic bookworm of a tiefling lore bard with a strong proclivity for magic and music. He had a love for romanticized stories of heroes and princesses and started adventuring to help people like in the stories he read. Harry's soul was being vied for by a demon, but every proposal it offered was met with rejection, and so far Harry had yet to kill a single enemy. This detail will come back into play later on. One of his first sessions was to deal with a kobold problem in a small village. The kobolds were stealing precious items from the village, and the town's gnome cleric went missing after confronting them. So the job was to find the kobolds and get the gnome cleric and the items back. Harry was joined by 4 other characters. Iris is a kobold wizard, who was also a shy nerd and a first-time adventurer. He wanted to solve the kobold dispute peacefully, since they were his kin. Then there was the trio. Cherry, the drow cleric of Lolth, who was as deadly as she was manipulative. She made it her personal duty to spread the influence of Lolth to the surface through subjugation and violence and later sacrifices. She's an absolute gem, I'm sure. Ramses, the changeling wizard, the ambivalent and calculating mage of the trio, who was Cherry's voice of reason, but ended up siding with her when things got catty or homicidal. Okay, so her voice of mild restraint. Got it. Also, Ramses' player was Cherry's player's in-real-life wife and the artist for both Cherry and Ramses' character sheets. Art was a big deal to this group. Many of the best artists flourished socially, and despite my many grievances with the trio, Ramsey was and still is a very talented artist. And then there was Leaf, the half-elf monk, the muscle of the trio that was both silent and nonchalant for most encounters, and was there to be their enforcer. The trio were all friends in real life and cared more about having a good time with each other and their inner circle than the story or working collaboratively as a team. And a side note, before the session started, Harry had a brief roleplay with Cherry, out of character, knowing her backstory as an abused and brainwashed drow cleric looking to be a matron. I thought we would work on the 2 of them building a friendship and trying to eventually make her lawful evil to either neutral or good. As you will see, that did not happen. Back to the session. Our party heard that the vineyard close to town was ransacked by goblins, so the 5 of us investigated it for clues. It was here that the first of many schisms started. Cherry's first suggestion was to just kill the kobolds and take their loot by force, since they were just vermin anyway. Yes, Cherry did suggest this in front of the kobold wizard. This was Iris's player's first session, and her character was indirectly called a vermin. Classy, Cherry. Harry immediately retaliated that we should try to negotiate first. Cherry retorted that he should just trust her. Harry was offended by this and stormed off to find the kobold's hideout on his own, with Iris the wizard following behind. The trio plotted to get more clues and evidence before the two nerds, while Cherry conducted a cunning plan of her own. In hindsight, I feel like I could have handled this argument without my character storming off. It did make my character look childish and not like a team player. Not only was my character a lawful good bard who tried to avoid spilling blood if possible, I was also shocked that the trio wanted to go immediately into the murder hobo mentality when we were preparing for the opposite. This was my first time dealing with their antics and it caught me off guard. Anyway, after the divide, both parties did their own investigations in the cleric's abode and the kobold's underground tunnels. We reunited after Harry apologized to Cherry for making a scene, because the story wouldn't move along unless Harry acknowledged Cherry's superiority, and we managed to arrange a parley with the kobolds. It turns out that the village was settled on the kobolds' ancestral land, and they kept harassing the villagers as a way to get them to leave. The gnome cleric was captured by the kobolds after she tried to get the loot back by force, and was now held as ransom. All they wanted was their land back. We were agreeing to talk to the villagers about proper reparations in exchange for the stolen goods and gnome cleric, who was unharmed if I recall. Cherry had different plans. She cast inflict wounds on the kobold leader as she and Ramses began to indiscriminately slaughter every kobold they saw. Iris the wizard, feeling helpless at watching his kin being massacred by his own allies, curled up into the corner weeping. Oh man, that really sucks to hear. If you're wondering why my bard didn't react to this, well, I was AFK at the time of the parley. I think I went to grab a snack or go to the bathroom, and I came back to shit hitting the fan, and being told my character was following Leaf as he was looking for the loot, which, to conclude that small plot thread, took Harry and Leaf to a trapped room where they sustained heavy damage from some poison gas trap or something, and Harry found the gnome's holy symbol. It was to Garl Glittergold if I recall. Cherry began to gaslight the gnome cleric, saying that all this bloodshed was her fault, and the only way to atone for what she did is to join her in the worship of Lolth. Okay, I guess I gotta respect the hustle here. This is where Harry and Leaf returned to the scene of the crime. I rolled an insight check on Cherry, acting like the kobold shot first. I didn't roll high enough to see through Cherry's lies, but it was enough to see that she was not telling the whole truth. Harry asked what happened to the gnome cleric, who whimpered that she just wanted to go home. Harry immediately moved between the two clerics and stood in front of the gnome to protect her from God knows what else Cherry had planned. I will admit fault here, as I instigated this PvP. I was acting in a way I believed a lawful good character would react to an evil person doing evil things, regardless of if it was a party member. Harry cast vicious mockery on Cherry, which she passed, and she and Ramses began to turn their gaslighting towards Harry, belittling his naive pursuit of right and wrong when it comes at the expense of the party, putting the town at risk with his own ego and black and white morality, yada yada yada. In reality, she just wanted him to hand over the gnome's holy symbol so that she could force her to enact her plan and corrupt her to Lolth's side. Whatever they said, Harry didn't move, attack, or speak further. He just stood in front of the gnome, staring sternly at Cherry. That was until Leaf snuck up behind Harry and knocked him unconscious with a quarterstaff to the back of the head. Harry remained out of commission for the rest of the session. With Harry out of the way, the trio continued to slaughter or capture every kobold they came across, including going to the nursery and butchering all the eggs they saw. They dragged the gnome cleric along and forced her to slaughter the kobolds too, crying the whole time. The only good thing that came out of that massacre was that Iris was able to successfully sneak a kobold egg under his cloak without the trio noticing. That little egg hatched and became an NPC kobold little girl that Iris and Harry pretty much raised together. But that's a story for another day. Okay, I'm glad to see that Iris at least got a little small win here, but the DM is definitely letting this trio get away with a lot. Once the bloodshed was done, Cherry enacted her cunning plan. The trio tied every captured kobold to a makeshift pyre, and Cherry demanded they worship Lolth or be sacrificed in her name, while forcing the gnome cleric to do the dark rites with her, praising the Spider Queen's glory as the flames grew higher and higher. The GM had no idea how to handle this turn of events and wanted the session to wrap up fast. We played for about 4 hours, and I think she had some errands to run, so she just let the trio win. Cherry's player wasn't happy with the ending of the session. I'm guessing because they expected more resistance, so the trio roleplayed a new ending where there was more interpersonal drama and trust issues between them. Cool, but did it have to stem from a kobold genocide and corrupting an innocent NPC? Not to mention traumatizing your fellow players? Yeah, it seems like the game master totally rolled over here, yet the trio still isn't satisfied. The session ended with everyone getting their reward, except Harry. He refused to take the gold for this job on principle. Getting money for a parlay gone wrong and getting knocked out by his own crew didn't sit right with him after all. He instead did what most bards do and write a sad poem about his trauma, which the players of the trio immediately laughed at. That was my first session with the trio, and what a session it was. For those of you wondering why we didn't vet these players in a session 0 or something to get intentions of the players, unlike a campaign, West March's servers are more of a crapshoot of whichever players are available at a session time. In character and out of character, we were all effectively strangers that had to work together and form bonds over multiple sessions if you happen to work together again or roleplay together in downtime. That didn't happen with the trio because they had their own inner circle and were very picky about letting outsiders into it, and most of the players made simple neutral good characters who want to help or go on an adventure. They weren't prepared for whatever BS the trio would pull. Whenever Cherry, Ramses, and or Leaf were in a session, the plot didn't matter. Only what they think would be fun at the other character's expense, and the plots. I wasn't perfect this session either. Like I said, I was AFK a bit, I split the party, and I started PvP even if it was brief. But was I a bigger a-hole than the trio? That's up to you to decide. Hopefully, this first story out of the 3 was entertaining for all of you. I mean, I think this is a pretty fun start. They go straight into murder hobo territory, they completely derail the campaign. It seems like the Dungeon Master gave them complete agency, but they weren't exactly happy about doing it. It is totally true that West Marches can be a complete crapshoot because you really don't know what you're going to get, and obviously by the time players get a reputation, it probably means that it's already time to kick them out of the server. To be perfectly honest though, there isn't anything inherently wrong with this trio wanting to be murder hobos. If you have 30 or so people in the server and at least the other 2 people involved and the DM wants to do it, it might even be fun to have like an evil party that derails stuff within the internal lore of the server. Clearly though, this was a mismatch. Iris, who was new, which made it even worse, did not want this campaign to go this way. So I'm always sad to see when a player has a bad first experience like this, where they expect D&D to be a certain way, they're trying their best to make it that way, they even have someone in the story, the author here, kind of backing them up, but things go completely south because a bunch of players just want to be chaotic and murderous. There's a time and place for every story and theme within D&D, but it seems like this wasn't the time for that. And I get it, it's online, people go AFK for small periods of time, it's partially on you for stepping away, but it's also partially on the DM for not hitting the brakes and saying, hey, by the way, the author's about to come back here, let's take a break since he's taking a small break. If you walk away a lot though, obviously they can only call a break like once or twice in a 4-hour session before it is like a major issue of you just being absent all the time. And this DM was on a bit of a time crunch, you said, so maybe they didn't call a break, but they normally would have called a break. I wouldn't be too hard on yourself for that. And you did initiate PvP, which is being confrontational, but obviously these guys were being pretty combative themselves. I do like that both sides of the combat weren't aiming to kill each other. I really hate when West Marches have PvP that's like permadeath. I actually covered a story last week where there was a permadeath situation. I still take more issue with their actions than yours. Hey kid, want to try some gamer subs? You can now get free samples anywhere in the world and try the most delicious 0-calorie energy powder in the game when you use code Goblin. Each sample sent out gets me one step closer to my quest to get a flavor that tastes suspiciously like Dr. Pepper. If you end up liking those free samples and want to purchase some gamer subs, make sure to use the link in the description or use my code to get 10% off your entire order. Let's read story 2 that goes by the name The Trio Strikes Back. So unfortunately, this was not the last time I would have to deal with Cherry nor the trio. In fact, my second session with them was so infuriating that I nearly quit the server. The PCs were Harry and the trio, but we had a different game master. Our quest was to go to a village in the snowy region to investigate why multiple supply runs were going MIA near the mountains. There was a heavy blizzard that had been persisting in the region for multiple days, so it was definitely something magical. Our job was to find the source of the blizzard and stop it so the village can get their supplies without delay. 2 of our characters learned how to drive a dog sled and made their way to the mountains. The trio ignored Harry for the most part and went on with their catty insult banter towards each other. Imagine the plastics from Mean Girls with magic and a kobold murder streak. This is going to grow larger by the end of this session. We made it through the blizzard after succeeding a few constitution saves and parked our sled dog near a tree at the base of the tallest mountain. I'm not sure how we figured it out, but we were able to deduce via Arcana check that blizzards that last this long tend to be the regional effects of white dragons. And all signs pointed to one residing close to the summit of the mountain we were directly under. We venture up the mountain until we spot an open cavern. Inside we notice multiple small draconic figures walking about on two legs. Kobolds obviously, and they seem to be guarding the dragon's lair. I suggest a plan to distract the kobolds with Harry's minor illusion to draw them away so we could sneak in. The trio opted for plan B, rush straight in and murder every kobold they see. Well, I guess it's nice that they're consistent at least. They do it with or without Iris, keeping up the streak of committing atrocities nobody else wanted but them. We all rolled initiative and we got a surprise round. Unlike last time, the kobolds were actively trying to harm Harry, so he had to fight to survive. But if he could help it, he didn't want to kill them. That did not happen. Harry managed to roll a nat 20 on a light crossbow attack. What I didn't know at the time was range attacks always usually do lethal damage. Hindsight's 2020, I guess. But also, in this Game Master's ruling, a nat 20 is always lethal too, which is a ruling that I don't care for, but I digress. A bolt went straight through the torso of one of the white kobolds, and Harry watched in horror as the blood from his first kill spread along the ice and snow. As I roleplayed that Harry felt like a horrible person, Cherry's player chimed in, "Why do you feel so bad about this?" I explained that Harry was 19 years old and this was his first kill, and on top of that, his victim was a kobold, just like his friend Iris the wizard. So he's obviously very shaken from this experience. I only received one reply, "Well, grow up," from Ramsey's player, while the trio, in character and out of character, laughed at how much of a dork my character was. I was completely silent and tuned out for the rest of the session, only responding in and out of character if someone addressed Harry or me directly. I was pissed that my own party was acting like complete dicks, and I grew pretty resentful towards them, both the trio and the players. I was half tempted to have Harry go back down the base of the mountain while they were busy killing the kobolds, take the dog sled back to the village, and abandon these a-holes to their fate. Alas, I am a trooper and decided to stick with the story to not make things difficult for a first-time game master. Besides, I don't think Harry is callous enough to leave fellow adventurers to freeze to death, no matter how monstrous he thought they were. We continued to investigate the cavern, and Harry found an egg holder with a Winter's Wolf pelt inside, implying the kobolds reared the white dragon from an egg and began to worship him as some kind of king. We also found some cold jerky, basically what little remained of the supply runs that fell victim to the dragon. We venture further into the cavern until we see a large icy den with an open ceiling leading out to the blizzard. Resting within the culprit of the storm and the disappearances, a young white dragon. Our party was level 3, so rushing into combat was off the table. So the trio decided to do a plan that required a degree of subtlety. On Cherry's terms, of course. Cherry asked Ramses to cast Comprehend Languages on the two of them, and she would go to parley with the white dragon now that she could understand and speak Draconic. Never mind the fact that's not how Comprehend Languages works. The worst part is that even with the threat of a white dragon killing us being a likely possibility if we mess up, Cherry still kept her cards close to her chest. She told the party to trust her and walk ahead on her own. So as Harry, Ramses, and Leaf waited behind the entrance for some kind of signal, Cherry talked to the white dragon about joining forces and taking over the world. The only one who could understand this was Ramses, who did not care to inform any of us about this development. While this was shocking for me, I wouldn't mind if this exchange was only a couple of minutes before we moved along. This conversation between Cherry and the white dragon lasted over an hour in real time. Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but I've seen this happen way too many times where basically the main character kind of person just keeps talking and talking and talking, and these more passive or first-time dungeon masters don't know when to shut a conversation down because, you know, technically talking is a free action, which means it can go on indefinitely. But if you realize it's a circle where someone's talking over and over and over again until they get the response they want, you don't necessarily have to give it to them, you just have to say something that now has to be addressed. You don't have to have the dragon attack them either. You can have like a kobold enter the room, you can have the blizzard get stronger, you can have some environmental change that now has to take the full attention of the party. Don't let someone like Cherry hog the spotlight like this. An hour of plotting and scheming and going over the same plots and schemes over and over again while the rest of us just sat back and waited for something to do. Maybe I wouldn't be so mad if it wasn't just Cherry doing all the talking, and we all could engage in this conversation with someone acting as translator, but that didn't happen. Cherry's player wanted to play a character that was all about secrecy and lies and expected everyone to just be cool with it. All Harry and the other two could do was twiddle our thumbs while Cherry got to hog the spotlight. And guess what? None of that mattered, since the dragon had no interest in working with them, or maybe Cherry just didn't meet the final charisma check to charm the dragon to her side. I don't remember it in great detail, and attacked her on the spot. Cherry got upset by this sudden but inevitable betrayal, and combat began. At least now someone other than Cherry gets to do something. On Harry's turn, he pulled out the winter wolf pelt from his pack and displayed it to the dragon. This is the only moment that made the session worthwhile for me. Harry called out to the dragon, "The kobolds outside took care of you with this. Does this mean anything to you? Do you feel anything for them?" The dragon snarled in response, not even a little bit. In a fit of rage, Harry lashed out at the dragon with a second level dissonant whispers. The dragon failed his wisdom saving throw and tried to desperately fly away from the scrawny tiefling, but to no avail. That's just a great mental image. In the end, we managed to kill the dragon, stop the blizzard, and save the village. We went back and collected our rewards, and the session came to an end. I was sick of the bullying and toxic behavior from the trio, both in character and out of character. I was planning to leave the server altogether. I told Iris's player about what happened and she convinced me to stay, as she had a lot of fun with our player characters being homies and would hate to see me go. This made choosing what to do complicated. You see, I'm a big people pleaser and I have a hard time confronting other players on their BS, as my natural instinct is to assume I'm in the wrong and need to better myself for everyone to have fun. This is what I was dealing with in regards to the trio. Both rage at how dickish they were, but also second guessing myself that maybe the players aren't so bad and I just have to get to know them better. My second guessing won out, so I stayed in the server, and on some level I'm glad I did. I made a lot of good friends, was part of some cool stories, and even ran a cool series of sessions relating to Harry's biological family being part of a devil-worshipping cult that had to be defeated. My time there helped me grow into a better player and game master, and also left me so traumatized that I feel like I became a worse one. And I had one of those traumatic sessions just before I was kicked out of the server. My last session, which obviously we'll dive into pretty shortly here. I feel like it's always healthy to have a little bit of self-doubt when you're getting irritated at people and ask yourself, am I the one being difficult here, or are they truly being frustrating? Obviously, you don't want to blow up the first time something goes mildly wrong, because maybe it was just a one-off thing, maybe you guys just don't like the same stuff at the game table, but it really doesn't matter. But if you find yourself constantly miserable at the table every time any member of this trio shows up, it's probably either time to say something, or since you're in a West March, I guess try to find a dungeon master that also secretly hates them too and would never invite them to their party, so that you know at least you and Iris can play a game safe from them. Maybe you'll hear about their antics across the server or in the greater story of the campaign, but you won't have to experience it firsthand. These guys obviously sound disruptive enough where there's probably a bunch of people that don't like playing with them. I'm glad that you stuck around enough to find a bunch of good friends, and the great news is that you can take all those friends, become a game master, and do stuff outside of the West March. That's why I usually advocate for players, even if they leave a campaign, to just keep in contact with the people you like. Unfortunately, sometimes if you can't find a good table, you have to patch them together yourself and do a little bit of networking, which sounds like a lot of work, but once you're able to actually pull it off, I'm sure you'd be glad that you did. Let's read the final story of this trilogy, called Story 3, Cherry the Divine, aka my final session. So we're finally here, the final part of the Cherry trilogy. This is the session where I finally lost my patience with Cherry, and due to the reasons I explained in the beginning of the story, I was kicked from the server. Okay, so the third strike's coming up, but before we get any of that, it's time for some server politics. Boy oh boy, I'm excited. You see, one of the other reasons I wanted to leave the server was because Cherry and Ramsey's players had been promoted to moderators. I guess it was because they were pretty charming, good artists, and event organizers, but they became in charge of the lore and what character updates or characters were approved or denied. But all I remember from those days is that Cherry's player would run private sessions for them and their friends that were super deadly high CR monster meat grinders, meant to skyrocket their XP faster than other players. Anyone who did join was not allowed to heavy roleplay like most sessions allowed, only focus on combat, and that was it. That right there completely ruins the entire balance of the server. One thing that is super hard to balance about West Marches is XP, loot, loot agency across different tables. If you have one person that's going to give a bunch of XP and a bunch of good loot, you suddenly have 5 people that are infinitely more strong than the rest of the 30 people in the server. Let's imagine a scenario where Cherry and the rest of the trio are level 10. They join another DM's campaign where maybe they're level 7. The Dungeon Master and the other 2 players that are stuck in that session with the trio that's vastly outgeared and outleveled is going to have such a rough time. They're going to feel so weak, and if the Dungeon Master has to scale up the encounter to make it challenging for the trio, it's going to feel so bad for the other 2 players. And I can guarantee you that the trio isn't going to scale themselves down because they're literally mods in the server. Why would they nerf themselves? They'll say it's okay, and now the Dungeon Master has to deal with it. I know it sounds bad in theory to have like the entire server milestone capped on their levels based on the slowest party, but how else are you going to do it and make it fair for everyone at the table? Another reason why West Marches are kind of rough. We're only a couple sentences into this story and I already derailed it. Let's get back on track. Another big change happened. The mods introduced a new rule into the server. No evil characters would be accepted from that point forward. I'm guessing they were running so amok in sessions I wasn't a part of that they had to be reined in. So Cherry and Ramses were officially retired as player characters because they were lawful evil and neutral evil respectively. Leaf was exempt from this because he was true neutral. Now you think that would be the last time we would hear of Cherry, right? Wrong. For some reason that I can't fully recall, Cherry had made some kind of eldritch or demonic pact with an otherworldly being and gained an abundance of power, becoming some kind of Loki-esque demigod figure that would go around effing with player characters that she would rope into her games. One of these games of hers would be my final Cherry story, and also my final session with the server. The session was being run by Cherry's player. Why would you join that, man? Which made me a little concerned, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt. The story goes as follows. The party had received summons to help a mysterious benefactor with a hit on her life. The party includes Harry, a fighter that I think was a friend of the trio they got into the server, an Azamar Bard, a Tempest Cleric, an Archfey Warlock, and a Celestial Warlock, and a Vengeance Paladin. We all met in an alleyway that revealed a magic door that led to a weird part of town that no one recognized, and we congregated in this large guild hall with a longhouse table adorned with refreshments. It was when we sat down that Cherry materialized and Harry and I started to get worried. According to her, she suspects a few black-hooded assailants want her dead for reasons she is unaware of, and needs us to keep her safe as her bodyguards. She kept pestering us to hurry our decision along like a sleazy car salesman, so the party agreed to help, even Harry. Even if he didn't like Cherry, he couldn't live with himself if he let someone die just because of his opinion of them. Harry's lawful good code of compassion became a real ball and chain after a while. So we went to the town square and saw a group of 5 or 6 black cloaked figures staring at us as we crossed over a bridge. From what we saw, they were heavily armored shadow elves. At first, we all discussed talking to them to try and smooth everything out, but nothing is ever smooth with Cherry. Out of nowhere, she cast inflict wounds on one of the black guards from 30 feet away, mind you, prompting all of them to draw their weapons and the civilians to flee in fear. Which again, I guess I'm glad to see that she hasn't changed in her divinity. Cherry disappeared because she was an illusion the whole time, and yet she could still cast a spell. Either way, initiative was rolled and a grueling fight began. I don't remember all of the details of the fight, but these shadow elves were supremely strong, and we only just scraped by with a victory that left most of us bloodied, injured, and the Tempest Cleric dead, zombified by one of the shadow elves' abilities, and killed again by us. This complicated matters, as we wanted to bring her back to life, but couldn't do so now that she was an undead creature. So the party skedaddled from the self-defense/murder scene to figure out what to do with the undead cleric. Well, except Harry. Harry stayed behind to clean up the mess and think of ways to help bring back the Tempest Cleric, while she tended to the dead. The rest of the party told me this was a bad idea because the guards would come and see Harry amongst an array of shadow elf corpses. While that was true, I was tired of the constant Cherry betrayals and wanted my lawful good bard to do something that made him and me feel slightly altruistic, even if it was just honoring the dead that didn't need to die. Besides, the alternative is something that would have caused more problems if Harry was there. The rest of the party returned to Cherry with the Tempest Cleric's body, saying that her assailants are disposed of, but at the cost of the Tempest Cleric. While she didn't care for the party's plight, Cherry did have another proposition to put things in her favor. She would bring the Tempest Cleric back to life as a humanoid, as long as they would bring all the bodies of the Shadow Elves back to her for some kind of ritual and swear a pact or oath to her. In asking why, she said to just trust trust her. Feeling like they have no other choice, the party lamented and accepted the deal. The Archfey Warlock returned back to the scene of the crime to tell Harry that they needed the bodies. Harry immediately stopped tending to the dead and asked why. The Warlock said Cherry could bring the cleric back in exchange for the bodies. In response, Harry retaliated. No, absolutely not. Do you have any idea what she will do with those bodies? She will sacrifice them to Lolth, her goddess. I've seen it before. The Warlock replied, having his patience tested. We don't have time to debate this. Can you think of any other way to bring the cleric back? Yes, cried Harry. Going to a local cleric, taking the body to a mage's college, anything but this. Please, I'm begging you not to do this. You can't trust her. The Warlock replied with a cold scowl. If you don't want to be part of this, you can leave. To which Harry, taken aback and offended, hissed in reply, fine, before storming off. The Game Master, Cherry's player for those who needed a reminder, asked if I was really leaving, because that would be leaving the remainder of the session, and I said I was sure. Harry walked away from this madness and was never seen by any of the party again. At this point, I muted my mic, deafened my earphones, and went on to other tasks, watching YouTube or starting my college courses. Was that an inconsiderate dick move? Yeah, absolutely, and I do regret the way I handled it. Looking back, it might have been some PTSD response at Cherry manipulating the party to do messed up shit again. All I picked up from the text channel was that the Tempest Cleric was alive again and the Archfey Warlock had gained some Hex Bloodstone in his inventory. I could put the two and two together from there. Several weeks after that session, I would receive a DM from one of the mods informing me that I incurred 3 strikes from anonymous sources saying I was inappropriate with fellow players. This caught me off guard and I was left shocked and anxious that I had upset someone to the point of them feeling uncomfortable or safe around me. To save face, I sent a message to the main channel of the server stating that I was leaving, glad to know and play with the people there, and I was happy to call them my friends. A lot of confusion spread through the chat because most players were as shocked about this development as me, but there was nothing that could be done, so I gave my friends a heartfelt goodbye and left. A few years passed and I had moved on from the group and heavy personal stuff, including a breakup with my girlfriend of 5 years, my dad going through chemo, and several job changes. I kept in contact with a few people from the old server, some of them in my own personal campaigns and others I just chat with on DMs. That's when I got an offer from a friend to join a new server being run by half of the mod team of the old server. Same basic setup, but better in their own words. It took some time to think about the offer because I was still traumatized by what had happened in the old server, and I didn't want the same kind of bullying and railroading to happen again. I was even unsure if the mods or the people wanted me after what I was accused of. Despite my trepidations, I took my friend up on the offer and reapplied Harry, who was accepted with open arms. After building up the courage, I had asked one of the mods of the new server what happened to the old server. It was then I found out how much shit went down after I was booted, not just with Cherry or Ramsey's players behind the scenes, but other players too that were causing trouble for my friends. I won't get over all the drama here, since they don't involve Cherry or the trio and aren't my stories to tell, but from what I heard, it was really bad bullying. Anyway, according to the mod, Cherry and Ramsey's players would go into the mod's private chat rooms to shit talk players behind their backs and decide who gets kicked or not based on who they personally liked. They would only interact with people who were in their inner circle. Everyone else was all business, talking about applications and lore questions with players out of their circle, etc. And had some kind of document chat log full of rumors and qualities that they didn't like about certain players. Yes, just like the burn book for Mean Girls. But the mod also revealed something interesting to me. I was kicked out of the old server for accumulating 3 strikes, kind of like a 3 strikes and you're fired policy at a job, but I only had 2 strikes against me. Congrats if you remember that little detail from the first story. Oh, so there just wasn't a 3rd strike. Nice. So while I don't have any proof of this, it seems like Cherry and Ramsey's players didn't like me or my character and made up a 3rd strike because they wanted to get rid of me and found me annoying. Needless to say, I felt pretty justified in my past anger towards them after learning that. 2 of the mods were disgusted by Cherry and Ramsey's players' behaviors, so there was a mass exodus that happened with people who took the side of the 2 mods, and left to start a new server where people could feel safe. Insert the Futurama, I'm going to build my own theme park with blackjack and hookers joke here. I've been playing on this new server for several years, and I have been having a blast. While I don't get to play often, I don't feel bullied anymore, which is a vast improvement. I want to wrap up this story by going over why I think the trio did what they did. Beneath all the BS, I think I can see the core of what the trio wanted with the old server. I think the trio's main objective was to have fun even at the expense of others. They worked long days and just wanted to kick back and have a game night with some friends. While they could roleplay, they seemed to only be engaged when it came to combat, grinding XP, and interpersonal character drama, which to be fair is a total type type of roleplay. And while the last part was apt behavior, it also stuck to the ethos of actions typically having consequences. So this kinda I can get away with murder because I'm a player character attitude didn't quite sit well with the rest of the group. Violence and subjugation were the only solution. They made it clear. It was their way or the highway. To be honest, I don't know how much the trio took the server seriously. It makes me wonder if they should have just made their own campaign where they could have the story go however they want. And finally, I want to ask, am I the a-hole? At least a worse one than the trio. Like I said before, I'm not totally innocent. I was immature and let my out-of-character feelings affect my in-character responses. I could justify my reactions by saying it was caused by some kind of PTSD, but it's hard for me not to make myself the one at fault for being confrontational. I think that I want to make this horror story to get a general consensus if all this was the trio's fault, or if I was the a-hole all along. For anyone curious, I don't know if this old server is still active or not. The last post I saw on the DeviantArt group was from 2022, but maybe that's because DeviantArt had become an absolute shit show by then. If Cherry and Ramsey's players are still keeping the old server running, I pray that they don't treat any other players or player characters like they treated me and Harry, because no one deserves to be bullied just so someone else can have fun. I think at this point I've made my opinion pretty clear that you don't come off as an a-hole. Obviously, people in the comments can share their opinions of what you could have done better. It's a frustrating situation, and clearly the new server seems to be thriving without them, so I think that's a pretty good case that even if you're difficult at times, you're not continuously difficult like this trio is. I actually really like your interpretation of why they were doing what they were doing. It seems like they, as a group, were having a lot of fun with their interpersonal play. They just needed a couple more players and a DM that enjoyed that playstyle, and they'd be having an evil campaign that had so much murder and chaos, with everyone having a blast the entire way through. The unfortunate scenario is they were in a West March campaign where most people wanted to be leaning towards good. They wanted to be cooperative with the other parties. They didn't want to derail the entire server. Because just think about it, it's so much easier to find 2 more players that want to play an evil campaign than it is to change out a third or like a half of a West March server. 2 to 3 people versus 10 to 15 people. The moment they became mods and started to try to completely flip the server on its head, should have been a flag to them that maybe they're trying a little bit too hard. But who knows, maybe they enjoyed the power a little too much, and that would just kind of reinforce that they're bigger a-holes, right? That's at least my takeaway. I'd love to read in the comments what everyone else's thoughts are. Make sure to like and hype the video as it really helps the channel grow, and subscribe to become a member of the channel if you haven't already. I was out for a little bit because I was sick, but I'm back to making weekly videos. As always, I really hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.